is our last one, the 2 versus 7 matchup between Michael Hetrick and Braun Duin. These, as we've been talking about, lots of Seachrome Coasts in every deck we've been telling you about. This is the one matchup where we do not have that going on. As you can see, Michael Hetrick is playing a Rug Pod deck versus the Frights deck that Brad Nelson and Braun Duin came up with for the Invitational.
Well, it was all Brad.
It's all Brad. Okay.
Yeah. Brian had me write down the deck list for him on Thursday night. So.
Okay. So, tell us a bit about... So, Brian's deck is a classical Frights deck, except for the fact that instead of going with Inferno Titans and Wormcoil engines, he's going with the Sun Titan Phantasmal Image package. A lot of times, especially in a matchup like this, a Frights deck is going to essentially basically just like a weirder ramp deck. It still is a deck with Titans at the end of the line. Michael Hetrick knows this. Michael Hetrick is playing Rug Pod, which is more of a podding for value as opposed to podding Depredators style deck. Has a lot of good targets, but I mean its only 6-drop is 1 Inferno Titan. So Michael's going to have to try to score a quick early victory in this matchup. Brian has the bigger late game, and possibly some of the better, might even have the better early game on top of that. It's a difficult matchup, I think, for Hetrick on all sides of the board.
Yeah. So Hetrick led things off with a Llanowar Elves, and Brian had a Faithless Looting on his first turn.
Alright, so second turn to Michael Hetrick. Michael Hetrick drew a second Birthing Pod. Probably not an ideal draw, but off his first one, so he has forced into Llanowar Elves. He's probably right now debating what method he wants to take here. Possibly by resolving whether he wants to resolve an early Birthing Pod or continue to cast creatures.
Yeah, and the early Birthing Pod, the big problem with that is that Brian has an Ancient Grudge already in his graveyard from that Faithless Looting. So he's going to go with a Borderline Ranger and search up a mountain.
Alright, so Borderline Ranger will search up a mountain. Michael Hetrick's deck does not really need double red in the main deck. All of his cards, the only red cards he has Zealous Conscripts and Huntmaster of the Fells that require red mana.
Brian tanking a bit here over his decision. We see some mana creatures in his hand. He does have the Unburial Rites in his graveyard.
Frights has a lot of different decisions early on. It has a lot of things it can do at 1 and 2 mana, and deciding which kind of colored mana to keep open when you're making your plays is actually very important. Deciding when to Faithless Looting also.
Yes, it's an extremely difficult deck to play. Now, Michael's really got to get aggressive here if he's going to have a chance.
Yeah, Michael swings in for 2 with Borderland Ranger. First damage of the game, dropping Braun Duin down to 18. Point we will see a Birthing Pod on 4 mana. Mike Hetrick is going to deal 4 to himself to play and activate Birthing Pod. Borderland Ranger is sacked, getting 4 drops. He has available Huntmaster of the Fowls and Phyrexian Metamorph at 4 mana. We will see a Huntmaster.
Yeah, Huntmaster of the Fowls coming down for Michael Hetrick. Pretty strong there.
Michael's going to try to attack the mana base of Braun Duin. Once he needs to keep win before Brian can basically get to Praetor time.
Yeah, I mean, once Brian has resolved an Elesh Door, and the game becomes almost impossible for Michael Hetrick. He only has so few cards that can survive the massive Praetor.
Now keep in mind, we have an Ancient Grudge in Brian's graveyard here.
Yeah, and that could deal with the Birthing Pod.
It's a 1-of in the main deck. He has a second one available on the board. It may seem like a strange one, but when you consider how many Mulch, Faithless Looting, and Tracker's Instincts are in the deck, it's a very safe main deck card.
Yeah, if you ever draw it, you can just looting it away. If you don't want it, of course. And a Phantasmal Image is going to copy Huntmaster of the Fells.
Alright, Phantasmal Image, a very versatile card, and probably the most innovative thing in the Frights list that Brian's been playing.
Now, what Brian doesn't know is that Michael has another Birthing Pod in hand.
Right, we should expect to see that pod replaced.
And a solid play from Brian there, waiting until Michael's turn and then using the Ancient Grudge on Michael's upkeep to destroy the Birthing Pod instead of doing it on his turn. That way he ensures that the Huntmaster won't flip on his opponent's turn or on his next turn.
Now the play we might see here is he's going to pod. It's possible that Hetrick will pod into Zealous Conscripts, untapping pod, and pod it into Inferno Titan here. I actually somewhat expect that play. Alright, and he's going to make it. He's going to get the... Actually, he can kill the entire board of Braun Duin with how illusion rules work. He's going to opt not to do it. I don't know if Hetrick is aware of that play. Just to go over you those at home, if you do target the Phantasmal image, you may assign damage to it because of Titan only, I believe, since it only deals the damage on resolution, the image would die and you're allowed to reassign the damage. It's very likely that on attacks that the image will be left nonetheless. Will nonetheless die here.
Yeah, very quickly Michael has taken this game to a kind of crazy level. I mean, it's turn 4 and he has an Inferno Titan on the table. It's like a ramp deck.
Talking before with Michael Hetrick about this matchup, he felt that this was a very poor matchup for him. So I think winning game 1 would obviously be very good for him here.
Yeah, and Brian flashing back a Faithless Looting, really trying to get the Elishnorn that he needs here. And probably no Elishnorn in hand.
Yeah, it would help. Yeah, Brian's gonna need an Elishnorn. The problem is finding another Phantasmal image doesn't help too much either. He has an Elishnorn in the graveyard, so he does have the ability to reanimate it and get it online. That would make the Elishnorn trade with the Inferno Titan.
Yes, Inferno Titan, very strong. Trades with Elishnorn.
We might see, so he has a Strangled Grace and a Green Sun Zenith in Michael Hetrick's hand. His options, he can try to use the Zenith to Zenith up an Acidic Slime and go with the mana base to try to keep Brian off of Unburial Rites mana. If he slimes a Shimmering Grotto and then uses Inferno Titan to blow up the Absence Pilgrim, he can probably keep Brian off making the Elishnorn. Very few untapped white sources in Brian's deck.
Yes. I mean, he just needs an untapped land, which would have to be a Forest at this point, or a Shimmering Grotto, and then he could filter for the white mana.
Michael's going to make a different play. He's going to go for the Strangleroot Geist. He's going to pod the Strangleroot Geist. Using life, he can pod it into Deceiver Exarch here. If he wants to build a way up to Phyrexian Metamorph, he could pod it into Deceiver Exarch untapping pod, getting metamorphing the Inferno Titan. Just think what he's going to do here. And then crash for quite a few damage. So Zealous Constructs and Deceiver Exarch, very good untap mechanics that really allows him for some good pod plays.
Yeah, some pretty incredible stuff can happen with Birthing Pod when you have those cards in your deck.
And Hetrick got a 2-1. He doesn't. Just I believe he could have thrown 2 extra damage at Brian's face there with how illusion rules work. He opts not to. So he will then deal 15 damage to Brian. 16. So Brian will drop to 4. It looks like Hetrick has been able to steal the first game here.
Yeah, he's really far ahead, and even if Brian can get an Elishnorn.
Alright, and that'll be it. Michael Hetrick moves up 1-0. So, when you go to talk about their sideboard plans, I've been talking with Michael Hetrick just before this round, and so what he felt he's going to do in this matchup is he needs to become a little more of the aggro deck. He doesn't feel like he can compete too much with Brian on the large creature scale of things. So he has 3 Hell Riders in the sideboard, which he's going to side in for Huntmaster of the Fells. Now, the biggest thing you have to know about the mirror here is that Brian has 4 Arc Trails in his sideboard, and Michael Hetrick has 3 Arc Trails in his sideboard. Both these creatures play 8 mana. Both these decks play 8 mana creatures on both sides, but you can expect kind of a fiery battle, mana creatures dying back and forth. Michael's going to try to win through with Hell Rider. He feels like his deck is probably he wishes it had 2 more mountains in it because of how vulnerable his Birds of Paradise are in this matchup. He really only has 4 Copperline Gorge, 2 Rootbound Crag, and 2 Mountain. He feels like that's not entirely enough to do this board plan, but it's still the best plan. He's going to go for it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Hell Rider is something that's pretty close to Michael Hetrick's heart. He was able to top 8 the Grand Prix in Salt Lake City, Utah earlier this year, playing a red-green aggro deck that featured 4 copies of Hell Rider. So, no surprise that he's here now, battling with Hell Riders in his sideboard. Something that he probably feels comfortable doing.
Definitely. He may, the other cards like Hound of Gristlebrand we may not see boarded in. He has one of those in his sideboard as well, but the 3 Hell Riders are certainly coming in here. On Brian's side, you can expect 4 Arc Trails out of him. He has a transformational sideboard plan that he uses against a lot of decks. I don't believe he will use that at all against Rug Pod. At this, he has to like how things line up in the main deck as they are. He has a Strangleroot Guy sort of War and Peace plan, but like I said, I don't see that coming in.
Yes, and the Strangleroot Guy's sort of War and Peace plan, very good against control players. Not so good against decks like Pod or Delver or Red Green Aggro, or even Ramp. When you play against something like Solar Flare, though, you're going to be very happy that you have that option.
So both players here probably won't take too long to sideboard, especially in an event like this. Both players will usually have figured out their boarding plan the night before.
Yeah.
I've played with it a few times. Usually it's a very quick maneuver.
It's always odd when somebody's thinking about how they're going to sideboard in a top 8 match.
Sometimes you'll see people change. They'll have tested the night before, and halfway through they'll decide that they didn't like the plan that they were doing, or they feel like they're behind, or maybe need to reboard based on certain conditions.
Yeah, maybe your opponent sideboards differently than you had intended.
Right.
Perhaps you feel that your opponent plays the deck differently than your friend who you're playtesting against plays the deck, and as a result you need a different iteration. Lots of questions need to be asked. Sideboarding is one of the most skill-intensive parts in Magic. I mean, it's very hard to have a good sideboard and to know how to use it correctly.
So I believe this is our first match to have Michael Hetrick up 1-0. Remember, our other matches that we have going on, currently we have Shaheen Sarani versus Ronnie Rittner, Max Tietz versus Lauren Knoll, and Adam Boyd versus Jerry Thompson. We'll keep you updated on the game scores of all 3 of these as we move through this match.
And again, I'm Jacob Van Lunen. I'm being joined by Matthias Hunt, and we're in Indianapolis, Indiana, bringing you guys coverage of the Star City Games Invitational. It's a huge tournament, players playing for some really big surprises. And
this is day 3 of the competition. All players playing 4 rounds of Legacy and 4 rounds of Standard on both Friday and Saturday.
So these two have already battled their way through 16 rounds of Swiss.
Yeah, they did battle each other. Most of these players, because of 16 rounds, have played most of the other top 8 competitors at one point or another. These two actually did play in Standard earlier in the tournament. Braun Duin scored an easy 2-0 victory. It was Hetrick's first loss of the tournament. Hetrick was our last undefeated player. Brian's going to go to 6 this game. Yeah, so the two of them battle. I remember Michael Hetrick lamented that he felt like his deck was showing up at all the wrong times after the match. He was, according to me, he was routinely drawing pod targets the turn before he was podding into them. And found it. I remember, he lost about 2-0 in about 20 minutes in the match. So out for revenge here. This was his only loss in Standard. He went 7-1 in the Standard portion of the tournament. And up 1-0, and right now he has his opponent a little bit on the ropes. Brian's mulliganing to 6.
Looks to be happy.
Yeah, well, Brian doesn't need too much to be able to get into the game. If Brian can get an early Elish Norn, remember, Michael Hetrick doesn't actually have any way. If Brian can just make a turn 4 Elish Norn, he should be able to win. Michael can't interact with that. He just kind of has to blindly go into it.
Yeah, I can't imagine he wins from through a turn 4 Elish Norn.
So we have mana creatures from both players. Michael Hetrick has a Bonfire, and it looks to be a Bonfire and an Arc Trail in his opener. Mulch comes from Brian on turn 2. He hits 2 lands off it, as well as putting a Faithless Looting and an Unburial Rites in the graveyard. probably one of the best mulches you could hope for. So he's going to cast Faithless Looting. He has a good number of lands in his hand right now. So we're going to see some of the lands go away. I don't think he's still lacking on a reanimation target. He discarded Razorverge Thicket, and he discarded the 2 cards he drew actually off the mulch. Lands don't appear to be the problem. It's business that he has right now. Fortunately for him, he has 2 more Faithless Lootings to go through. So overall, a very good start for Braun Duin.
Remember, Brian's deck is capable of an Elesh Norn as early as the 3rd turn of the game.
Right.
He needs some mana creature and a Faithless Looting, and he can get there.
Yeah. Brian, we're essentially, Hetrick has to be the aggro deck. He is racing. It's a race for him to win before Elesh Norn happens. He's going to slow Brian down a little bit, arc trailing 1 and 2, killing the birds, putting Braun Duin at 18. And then he'll pass the turn with no other creature. So what Brian will do is he'll want to dig. He can use the first Faithless Looting to dig. The second one's a little less. He wants to make sure that if he naturally draws a Praetor or something, that he is able to then discard it. So off his mulch, he gets 2 lands and bins a Tracker's Instinct and an Unburial Rites. Excellent card advantage engine for Brian.
Yeah. The ability to use your graveyard as a resource is just so strong here.
All right, Jerry Thompson up now 1-0 over Adam Boyd. If you recall in that matchup, Jerry's playing a classical Delver list versus Adam Boyd's mono blue Delver list. So they'll be going to sideboarded games, and the winner of that match will play the winner of this one.
Yes.
So back to our action. Brian made another Birds of Paradise, which brings us back to Hetrick's turn. Hetrick does have another kill spell for it, but his board presence is a little low. So he's going to make Birthing Pod, and he's going to have the birds pod themselves into something more respectable. He's into a Strangle Rootgeist.
Probably.
And he will put Brian to 16. Hetrick himself is at 16 from the damage in his Birthing Pod, though life total of Brian much more important to the outcome here.
Brian is just trying to get to a certain point, whereas Michael is trying to win before that point is achieved.
Faithless Looting flashback from Brian. Remember, he has options to flashback of Faithless Looting and Track. Well, he doesn't actually have the mana for Tracker's Instinct yet. Well, he has that off the Birds of Paradise, but Tracker's Instinct, another possible flashback target. What Brian doesn't know is that his mana creatures are a little unsafe right now. Michael Hetrick has a Bonfire of the Damned in his hand. So Brian will discard 2 more lands. Tap Birds of Paradise to cast another Faithless Looting from his hand. Still no Praetor, it would seem. Or really a creature at all. Well, okay. Avacyn's Pilgrim and Shimmering Grotto hit the bin. And then he will cast a Avacyn's Pilgrim, a forest. He has 2 cards up in his hand, and pass the turn back to Michael Hetrick. Hetrick draws the turn, Copperline Gorge.
And here Hetrick can go up the chain with Birthing Pod quite far if he wants to. He can grab a Deceiver Exarch and untap, and then grab a Forge Hop if he so desires.
Which I think is likely Hell Rider if he does do that. The decision
also, so.
Yeah, so that's excellent. The decision which he has to do is whether that's the play he wants to make, whether he wants to Bonfire for 1 on both of Braun Duin's mana creatures. He's 1 mana short of being able to do both of them.
One thing that he could do also is he could pod the Strangle Rootgeist into a Deceiver Exarch, untap the pod, tap the pod again, pod the Deceiver Exarch into a Huntmaster of the Fells, attack for 3, and then pass the turn, flipping the Huntmaster of the Fells.
Right. It's unclear whether or not he's kept any Huntmaster of the Fells in his deck for that play. I would imagine he's
Definitely
kept 1 as a pod target, but I know that I'm not sure he's done much more than that. I know he's planning to bring in Hell Riders for the matchup.
Go ahead and sacrifice the Strangle Rootgeist.
Yep, Strangle Rootgeist comes back as a 3/2. He's going to go get We'll see. His 3-drop options. He also could get Ether Adept here, Borderland Ranger, or Daybreak Ranger. He's gonna go for Borderland Ranger. It's possible that the only land in his hand is a Copperline Gorge, and he may want something that's untapped. So the forest in play. He's definitely gonna go for the bonfire on 1 play. So that'll take away both of Brian's mana creatures, put Brian at 15, and off the attack, put Brian down to 12. It appears that Hetrick has the Zealous Conscripts in his hand. He may have more post to board too. He does play 3 in his 75.
Yeah, and in the first game we saw just how strong Zealous Conscripts can be.
Right. It's a very versatile card.
Make a 4-drop into an Inferno Titan. Brian, flashing back another Faithless Looting.
And I have to think Brian has to make sure he doesn't get too frustrated here. He's got to be frustrated at how many cards he's gone through without actually seeing anything to reanimate, really. One thing which he could be doing, I suppose, is that he's not using his trackers. He could be paying more for that. So that last discard was an Elesh Norn and an Unburial Rites. So his graveyard's stacked, so you can't see that. But he is threatening an Elesh Norn next turn.
Curtis Frazier and Kurt Rain.
Pretty good to threaten.
Yeah, well, the bigger issue which Brian has here is that he's not going to be able to reanimate it this turn. And Michael will be able to put him in a fairly low life total next turn. It's off just a simple play as Pod into Howl Rider, deal 8. At that point, the Zealous Conscripts in Michael's hand should be enough to lethal even off an Elesh Norn that resolves.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I mean, Zealous Conscripts, when you steal an Elesh Norn, deals a whopping 9 damage to your opponent.
Right, so Brian has to stay at a very healthy life total. And both players have tested. Brian has to know that there's a Zealous Conscripts in here. So he's going to Arc Trail 2 and 1, killing the Borderland Ranger to try to keep Michael Hetrick, his own life total on the high end of things. But like you said, with 9 damage, with a Strangleroot Geistswing, that would be put Brian at exactly 9.
Legacy Open Player says the end of round 1. Legacy Open Player says the end of round 1. Active player, finish your turn and get your 5-turn extension. Again, end of round 1.
Sorry, just to pause here while they talk on the announcement. Okay, back to the game.
Yeah. Michael Hetrick, his next land is going to be he has plenty of lands. He has another Birthing Pod, a Forest, a Copperline Gorge. Not too much action in those cards. The only real card in his hand that we care about is the Zealous Conscripts right now.
Yeah, the Birthing Pods can be used to great effect, though.
Definitely.
They create a lot of card advantage all by themselves.
Have now been posted in yellow paper. Please find your seats.
Michael's going to play a Forest for the turn. He's going to cast Zealous Conscripts just on his own as a haste creature. He's going to steal a mana, so he's going to attack for 6, putting Brian down to 6. I believe he's going to pod his own Zealous Conscripts into an Inferno Titan. So that puts Hetrick down to 11. And he's going to place Brian on 3 with this Inferno Titan trigger, and then the next attack, which is actually a very strong play from Hetrick.
Yeah,
this is very good
for him.
That'll put Brian to 3, and presumably Michael Hetrick's next attack, the Inferno Titan, will kill just based off the attack trigger.
Yeah, now Brian looking to be 0-2.
Yeah, down in quite a hole in a matchup we thought was very good for him.
Very good for him.
Really, Brian's hoping to be quickly make an Elesh Norn. Michael said Hetrick has to kill him before Brian makes an Elesh Norn. And he's been able to do that both games so far.
And it's a very difficult thing to accomplish. And Brian's deck is a deck that you unfortunately have to keep a lot of very loose hands with. And a lot of the time you're pretty unaware of what's going to happen by turn 3 or 4 because of just how many of your cards... here we are.
And Unburial Rites on Elesh Norn is fine, but Brian may not see it. I'm not sure that I think he wants to see Hetrick do it. And Hetrick's going to attack, say 3 to Brian. Alright, so Michael Hetrick takes a 2-0 lead over Brian Braun Duin, looking for a spot in the top 4.
Yeah, so Michael has won the first 2 games. He's got to feel pretty good about this terrible matchup.
So
meanwhile, Brian, I mean, he's got to win 3 on the trot.
what I also like, I was talking to Michael Hetrick ahead of time about this. So sometimes, with these larger events, the competitors have the option of, at any point, if everyone left in the tournament at the beginning of a round agrees to split on prize, they will split the cash prize. Michael Hetrick has specifically denied any cash splits for this tournament, as he wants the entire first place prize to himself.
Wow! Even despite a bad matchup,
despite having his worst matchup in round 1, he has decided not. Last time I talked to him, he has not split anything. But he is taking it into his own hands, and he's looking for first place.
I appreciate that.
I like it a lot.
I don't split very often.
No, I'm somewhat of an opportunist person who splits. Like, if I knew my first round matchup was something I didn't want, I might split. If otherwise, I would not. An update. So Shaheen Sarani and Ronnie Rittner are now 1-1. And remember, that is our matchup up at the top of the bracket. Shaheen's the overall 1 seed. He's playing Esper Walkers, and Ronnie Rittner is playing one of our Blade Splicer Delver decks, but the equipmentless Blade Splicer Delver. Meanwhile, over here, we're going to game 3. Braun Duin down in a 2-0 hole, but still having what we both believe, and his opponent believes as well, is a very good matchup for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you can stumble sometimes, and that's one of the major issues with playing a deck like Frights. Sometimes you just have an inconsistent draw, and then you get down for the count very quickly.
Yeah.
Let's see, so Brian brought in Arc Trails, we assume, right? And maybe a Phantasmal Image, an extra one. What do you think Brian is taking out here? 2 Tracker's Instincts?
Brian, well, Tracker's Instincts, so I played Frights only in 1 tournament. I played it in Grand Prix Baltimore. So Tracker's Instincts is the worst card in the deck, and usually is the first card that comes out. It's there because you need a critical mass of these card draw effects, but it's really a terrible card. It's just across the board. The card, it's overcosted and doesn't really do enough. So when you cut something, it's got to be Tracker's Instincts that he loses. It may also be actually in this matchup that he's decided to not keep the Lingering Souls in.
Yeah, and I mean,
That's really
probably not that big of a deal, because against a deck like Michael's, I mean, he can just create a pod chain, grab an Inferno Titan, and
when Michael's winning, he's winning big. As we've seen both these times, Michael's just like swelling over on the board. 1/1s don't really slow him down. So at this point, if I were Brian, I might take out Lingering Souls here. It's really just race to Elesh Norn for Braun Duin.
Seems to make sense. And his deck is very capable of doing that. So Brian, work cut out for him now. Going to have to win this game. Going to get the play, but going to have to win on the draw for 2 games in a row against this pod here.
So the thing that you have to know about being down 2 games. So math-wise, in order to be able to win, so say you have a certain percent win, you have a very good matchup. The question is, how good does it have to be to take 3 consecutive games? I believe it's 7. If your matchup has to be 79% in your favor to make it likely for you to win 3 consecutive games. So while this matchup might be a good matchup for Brian, if it's only a 65-35 matchup, it's improbable that Brian will dig himself out of this hole.
So Brian leading things off in the Birds of Paradise. It has been done many a time, though.
It still has been done, and it's great when it happens, but yeah, it's one of those things, you'll say, oh, it's a great matchup. Well, I can win all these games. Yeah, that's true, but you have to win all of them. So, identical starts from both players of Copperline Gorge into Birds of Paradise. Brian's going to follow it up with a Faithless Looting on turn 2. And he's going to ready his combo here. I think Elesh Norn, he has an Elesh Norn in hand. He has to decide whether he wants it in his hand or in the yard. Oh, and he's got Elesh Norn on Burial Rites as the first discard.
Almost a slow roll.
This has got to put Hetrick in a very... Hetrick... and here's a white source, turn 2. So Hetrick's got to be fairly dismayed at this start. Yeah, he's drawn Zealous Conscripts, but he's getting Elesh Norn on the very next turn.
Yeah, he's facing down a third turn Elesh Norn when he's on the draw. So he's only going to have 2 lands in play, and Brian's going to have an Elish Norn on the table.
There's the Landwar Elves. So I remember when I had first played in Pro Tour Honolulu, the Frights deck was completely unknown. I played against it in the day 1 of competition, and I was a red-green player, and I remember this happened to me games 1 and 2. I remember walking away from the table. I was against Raphael Levy, and it was 10 minutes into 40 minutes after the clock, and thinking, what just happened? This is. I felt like I was playing Standard against Legacy.
Yeah, Rafa, man, he's good.
Yeah, I mean, no, but really, when you're on the side, on Hetrick's side, you really feel like you're playing against a Legacy deck. Wait, he just turned 3 to Elish Norm. I went mana creature, and then I got Elish Normed, and I took 3, and you're just like, this isn't Standard. So, Hetrick's still in the game. The reason he's kept in, the reason you haven't seen a concession is Michael Hetrick does have Phyrexian Metamorph in his hand naturally.
So Brian discarding an Unburial Rites and a Razor Verge.
Yeah, that second Unburial Rites on a discard has got to be pretty dismaying for Michael Hetrick. Brian, yep, he's going to make some more mana creatures here. Attacks for 4 with Elish Norn. Discarding Unburial Rites is another, also probably means that Brian has another one, would be my guess. You want to normally keep your Unburial Rites at this point just so you can get both halves of it. The only reason I think you would discard it is because you may actually just simply have another one. So Metamorpho Legend rule Elish Norn. But that jig's only temporary, as on the board, Brian has enough mana to remake Elish Norn and swing for 5.
Yeah, he can just tap the lands that he has in play.
Right. I think this is these are the games that both players are expecting to have happen more often.
Yeah, and when you're playing a deck like Brian's that can so consistently make Elish Norn on the 4th turn, you expect this type of game to happen.
Alright, Unburial Rites is going to come out. Elish Norn's going to come down. 5 damage will be served. Drops Hetrick to 11. Hetrick, remember that Metamorph was a 1-of. He has no other... He has 2 Phantasmal Images in his deck. And he does have one, okay. And if Brian doesn't have that additional Unburial Rites in his hand, he's going to feel pretty bad about having discarded one of them. He does have Gavoni Township, so he still has some game here.
If you signed up for $10,
Michael Hetrick's surprisingly still in this game. His deck has post-board, 2 Phantasmal Image, and the 1 Phyrexian Metamorph as the only ways the deck can deal with Elish Norn.
Again, if you signed up for the $10 draft, number 1.
He may also Zealous Conscripts it, so actually Brian would be pretty hesitant about making an Elish Norn here anyway. Michael will swing with his 2 creatures and township them, dealing 3 damage to Michael Hetrick, placing him to 6 life. The question is, can Hetrick steal this game? That if he has a Bonfire of the Damned in his hand, is that a Bonfire? I believe it's a Hell Rider, correct?
I think so.
So if that's a Bonfire, Hetrick will have taken over this game. Or it's a Hound of Gristlebrand.
Ooh. Hound of Gristlebrand's not a card you see that often. 2 colorless, 2 red for a 2/2 double strike with Undying.
Right, so then the last cards in his hand are Zealous Conscripts and I believe Deceiver Exarch. Or Birthing Pod. It's one of the 2. I'm not positive.
I believe it's Birthing Pod.
Alright, so passes the turn back to Brian Braun Duin. Remember, the Gavoni Township will really help Brian here, but on top of that, Brian's going to be faced with decisions of whether or not to township or to continue casting the spells he draws. He probably won't have the option to do both.
I think Brian may need to just keep pumping this bird and sending it to the red zone.
Right.
Seems like his best course of action.
The best thing Brian has going for him is that he's at 20 life.
He's got some bleeding to do before he's out.
If you signed up for $10 draft number 1, please come to the open stage.
He's going to Arc Trail both of Hetrick's mana creatures.
Please come up to the open
That's
stage.
very nice.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's okay. At that point, you almost want to consider whether or not Arc Trail is better served at the face. I mean, either. I mean, that's probably splitting hairs. Both of them are excellent plays. He's going to Phantasmal Image the Hound of Gristlebrand, and then he's going to attack for 1 with the birds, putting Michael Hetrick down to 5.
And Michael, here he does have the Birthing Pod, so he can Birthing Pod into a Zealous Conscript this turn if he so desires. Which could be a pretty strong play here. Hound of Gristlebrand. 2/2 double strike with Undying. Not the most commonly seen card. Michael Hetrick is such a strong player.
Yeah, especially with Rugpod, there's a lot of lines, a lot of lines to play to be aware of, and also just to be aware of, just to see where your outs are. There's so many different cards you can top deck at each point that you usually have a live strategy at most points of a game, and he's doing a great job of finding them. This is certainly a game. There was a turn 3 Elesh Norn. There's a turn 3 Elesh Norn with 2 Unburial Rights, and yet Michael has made a game of it.
Yeah, Michael may win this game.
Right. To be fair, I would want to be on Brian's side of the table right now, but Michael's in it. And he has, another Elesh Norn in hand. All right, that's enough for Hetrick will scoop up his card. He already answered 2 Elesh Norns. The third one will get him. So Braun Duin gets a game. 1 down, 2 to go for him. So he's going to try to claw his way back into the semifinals of the Invitational.
Michael Hetrick, man. He's a good Magic player.
He's a very strong
Powerful
player.
wizard.
The wizard of many levels. Michael Hetrick, probably best known as what seems to be described as he winning a Moto PTQ every season, which is quite accomplishment, as they're very difficult. He is underscore Ship It Hala on Moto, for those of you who play Moto. You can also follow him on Twitter at the Ship It Hala on Twitter.
Yeah, and he wins Magic Online PTQs like they're FNMs.
I remember talking to him about this. It's weird because he was in our testing group in Barcelona because he had, won a Magic Online PTQ, and he said that he had won 5 Magic Online PTQs before, which has got to be... I can't think of anyone who's won more than that.
I don't think there's... I mean, I'm not positive, but it seems highly unlikely. Those tournaments are often well over 500 people.
Yeah.
Usually, they're well over 500 people.
Yeah, some of them usually there'll be a 512 person one or a 768 person one. He finished in the top 50 at Barcelona, which in the old system would have been good enough to keep him on for Seattle. New system's a lot harder, and so he's currently not qualified for Pro Tour Seattle.
Yeah, he's going to have to go and win another Magic Online PTQ.
Well, all right.
I mean, if the past tells us anything, it tells us that he's capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
And watching him play these matches, I mean, he's playing really well.
Playing very solidly.
Yeah.
So Hetrick will be back on the play for Game 4. And if there is a Game 5, he'll be on the play for that. He just has to hope that Brian doesn't get, the turn 1 Faithless Looting, discarding Elesh Norn on burial rights. Hetrick has got to, avoid that. On the play, he looked to be all Arc Trails, no lands. So Hetrick will be going to 6 this game.
And you can't keep a 1-lander here.
Yeah. So in other words, we're going to try to get you updates on the other matches as soon as we can here. This match going rather quickly in Game 4 already.
Yeah.
Between Braun Duin and Michael Hetrick.
And Michael Hetrick quickly taking the 2 games that he won. The first game especially fast. Inferno Titan just coming down out of nowhere off of multiple pod triggers, untap effects. And then Game 2, a very similar game plan from Michael Hetrick. Brian Braun Duin in Game 3, was able to have a Elishnorn on the battlefield as early as turn 3.
It was the third Elishnorn that did him in.
Yes. Michael Hetrick finally fell to the third Elishnorn after they came out on turns
3, 4.
4, and 6. And it's a faithless looting.
Alright, so Hetrick has to cross his fingers a little bit here.
So, I see a phantasmal image in hand for...
So Sun Titan and Elishnorn go in the bin. Interesting choice. Usually, sometimes
what's pretty good for your hand.
What that tells me is that actually Brian doesn't feel like his hand has any ability in its mana to cast either of those spells. He probably has 0 white sources. Hetrick will make a land and make a turn 2 Birthing Pod. Drops himself to 18. He's setting up to try to get some really strong plays here. I think what he may try to do in this situation is acidic slime, like quickly find his way to an acidic slime and then find a way and then start potting into metamorphs and images for his acidic slime. As we see, actually has metamorph and image in his hand.
Oh, that actually can hurt him in many ways.
Okay, so
some
updates from across the other board. We have Shaheen Sarani currently up 2 games to 1 over Ronnie Rittner. Remember, Shaheen Sarani, as you can remember if you've been following our coverage, he and Michael Hetrick were the 2 undefeated Day 1 players. Both of them ended up at the number 1 and 2 seeds. Both of them actually, at some point, were worried about being in contention, but both clawed their way back in and became our 1 and 2 seeds for the tournament.
Both of them also at one point were in danger of becoming the same person.
That's also true. In what's a long drawn-out Delvermere, Lauren Nolan has taken the first game over our previous Invitational winner, Max Teets. They're currently playing Game 2. And Adam Boyd has managed to equalize with Jerry Thompson. They are at 1-1 as they are going to Game 3.
The Birthing Pod sacrificing a Llanowar Elves to grab a Strangleroot Geist for Michael Hetrick there. Very good for his very aggressive game plan here in post-boarded games. Another Faithless Looting from Brian. Going to look to find it on Burial Rites as fast as possible, and I believe he has found that on Burial Rites. So he's going to pitch that, and then next turn, Brian is going to be able to put an Elishnorn into play. And I believe that will be fast enough. He's got some dangerous stuff going on the other side of the table, but
yeah,
get this Elishnorn onto the table, things will be looking much better.
And so we know that Brian does or does not have the Unburial Rites. Alright, so the Rites is in the yard.
Oh, and an Ancient Grudge. Very good.
The Ancient Grudge is very relevant right here.
Yeah, now Brian can...
It really takes away a lot of Michael Hetrick's outs. His out. Remember, Hetrick does have 2 clone effects in his hand, so he has a way to answer Elishnorn, but that's not really the relevant part, because he won't have anything left. If his creatures are dead and he gets grudged a bunch. So, Phantasmal Image coming down on Strangleroot Geist. Ancient Grudge coming down on Birthing Pod, and Brian Braun puts himself firmly in the driver's seat for this game.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're seeing how I expected this matchup to look.
Right. So, like I said, when he was down 2-0, Brian probably not odds on to be able to claw away out of a hole. At 2-1, I think he's about a coin flip to win, and if he manages to win this game, I think he's an overwhelming favorite to come up to finish the comeback.
It's looking like the first match we're covering is going all the way to 5 games, and it's going to finish before the other matches, so we'll be able to bring you guys coverage of another match as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, one moment. Michael has to pee.
Okay, Michael. So we're gonna sit here and ponder on the board a little bit. Michael's has, and sometimes in these long matches, you actually will have that. Judges, you're allowed to request a bathroom break in an untimed round from a judge, and Michael has done so. So yes. We're gonna bring you back over here. We'll talk to you for a bit, rather than looking at the same board state. Some of our other matchups, so we have Shaheen Sarani and Ronnie Rittner. Shaheen's up 2-1 over Ronnie Rittner in that one, which I think we agreed we liked. The fact that Ronnie wasn't playing any equipment, we felt like Shaheen really could get ahead in that matchup.
Yeah, no Celestial Purges and no equipment for him. I talked to Shaheen a little bit this morning, and Shaheen thought that, especially with the 5-game match as the control player, when Ronnie has so few answers post-board, Shaheen thought that he was a huge favorite to win this. He was very confident that he was going to make his way into the semifinals.
But from there, did he feel like he was less confident?
He didn't really talk about the next match. I mean, Shaheen, is of the mindset when playing Magic that you think about the match at hand.
Right, and that's a really good, especially with the amount, in these high value tournaments. It's the first round you have to make sure you win. From after there, you kind of have to play. You will play it on the fly more, or maybe you'll have some friends on the side play testing it for you, and you'll ask them what they've thought about the matchup.
But I mean, that's really what you want to do when you make the top 8 of a tournament, and you get there. There are 6 people who you might play against, and 1 person who you're definitely going to play against, and you should be spending more than half of your practice time the night before practicing against the deck that you have to play against first, because that's what's important. You have to win that matchup, because if you only spend 1/7 of your time trying to beat your quarterfinals matchup, and he spent all of his time trying to beat his quarterfinals matchup, then your opponent's probably going to beat you.
Right. Actually, oftentimes what will happen is you'll spend the night sleeping, and the people you are rooming with spend the night playing your matchup. And then, and then over breakfast, they'll tell you all about the matchup.
Exactly. That's how it's supposed to be done.
Right.
That's why it's good to have friends in competitive Magic.
Yeah, it's not that Magic is, I guess, in the end, an individual sport. So some people, when they talk about Magic teams, they say, well, this isn't really a team game. And I guess at that point it is true. It's not technically a team game, but the amount of actual work that has to go into creating the best decks and preparing for tournaments oftentimes is a lot for a single person to do. Realistically, a team is much better in that aspect because of their ability to kind of share the work on it.
Yeah, and Magic in the past has been a team game.
Right.
From time to time, and again this fall.
This fall will be a team game.
And do you have a team?
I do have a team for the team.
Who's your
Grand Prix.
team?
My team is myself, Andres Prost from Alaska, and then Kyle Stoll also from Minneapolis.
Very nice.
So
good team.
Yeah, our team, which is Team Panic from Barcelona. I believe we were dividing into 3 teams for that one. So we're gonna hope. Michael Hetrick also on that team. I believe he's teaming with Sipit Hall. I believe he's teaming with Ricky Sitter and Shahar Shanar for the tournament.
That's another.
That's the Sacramento side of the team.
Yeah, Shahar Shanhar.
Yeah,
and
definitely a rising star and Sitter.
Sitter. Not.
I believe. Is my belief. I don't want to quote them on that.
Sipit Hall.
Yes.
Okay.
Who routinely gets confused with Michael Hetrick because of their name.
Yes.
And deservedly so.
I actually had to do a written feature match between the 2 of them.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. I referred to them by name and not by Shibithala and Sibithala.
Oh, okay.
Because that might have been confusing for the reader.
All right.
But I was tempted.
Sure. So you're also playing in the Team Grand Prix.
I am playing in a Team Grand Prix.
So by every indication that I can tell, every pro or current pro, past pro, or aspiring pro is traveling to this Grand Prix, which makes me think it's going to be one of the most difficult Grand Prix I've ever been to.
It's definitely going to be a very difficult Grand Prix. It's going to be large. And it's funny because Team Grand Prix historically are smaller than other events.
Well, there's less entrants, technically.
Yes. However, there are going to be a lot of entrants here.
Yeah.
I'm expecting there to be around 500 teams at this event.
So, yourself, Chris Lockman.
And Brad Nelson.
Very nice.
So, the Sliver Kids. It's the name of our team. Brad is a Sliver Kid.
Brad's an honorary Sliver Kid?
Brad is an honorary Sliver Kid. We've known him since before we were the Sliver Kids.
Sure.
Which is hilarious because, Brad was like this random dude who played the Perilous Research Storm deck in Standard on Magic Online. And we like knew him through that.
Okay,
and, like,
so
talked to
a
him
long
sometimes,
time ago.
and then met him at 06 Nationals, I think, was the first big tournament he had qualified for.
Okay, that was the year. Was that the year Antonino won Nationals?
Yes, he beat Ben in the finals.
Okay, so Urzatron Blue was the deck there.
Yeah, or wasn't it? I'm
sorry, maybe
Solar Flare.
So okay,
Solar Flare. It was Solar Flare. It might have been won by Tron. Anyway, met Brad there, and we've been friends for a long time. Should be a good team. Always good to have teammates who are your friends.
Yeah, team chemistry probably more important in the end, I would say, equally if not more important than play skill in these events. All right, so we're returning to the game here. If we recall where we left, Hetrick had a great board presence, and then Braun Duin promptly removed it all. He's threatening an Elishnar next turn. He has Phantasmal Image, Stranglegeist, and he has Ancient Grudge to Birthing Pod. Hetrick does have an image and a metamorph in his hand, so he has plenty of answers to the Elesh Norn. The problem is that the Elesh Norn will leave his board with nothing on it. He's going to image the Strangleroot Geist.
Post-combat.
I can't say I understand. Okay, what he wants to have is he wants it to persist back as Elesh Norn when it dies. He probably want to play it post-combat because he actually didn't want... He can't afford to have it get blocked.
Very reasonable.
What's interesting is actually when it does undie back, it will, Elesh Norn at that point, will kill the Birds of Paradise on Braun Duin side of the table from state-based effects. It will also kill the Phantasmal Image, which will then undie back without another creature, so it'll come back as a 1/1 without the Phantasmal Image ability. It only gains the illusion ability if you choose you may choose a creature to copy. If you do, it gains this ability. Now, if you don't choose a creature, it doesn't actually gain that ability. So Brian's not going to go for it right away. He's going to flashback Faithless Looting.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. This is a very.
This all depends actually, and Michael Hetrick could actually end up with a Strangleroot Geist. Well, that depends on whether Michael Hetrick wants to end up with a Strangleroot Geist in play, depending on how he stacks his own undying triggers. So, like, if the play of reanimating Elesh Norn is made, there's a lot of different things that go on here. Because of that, though, Brian is playing more mana creatures into this, which actually will not really. It's more just feeding to the fodder, though. It takes a little bit of rules knowledge to actually know what's going to happen here. Which, once again, I would say, if you're in this situation, call a judge. Ask a judge. If you're not sure how the rules work, they will be glad to tell you.
They can't tell you what's going to happen.
No, you can just predict what's going to happen. You can explain. So you can't. So then there's a trick of how do you ask a judge correctly on this question. What you do is you would explain what you believe will happen. You can kind of say, like, you can ask for clarifications on the rules by kind of like explaining what you believe is going to happen to the board state and making sure that you can ask them if this was what would happen under the rules. You can give them a theoretical and ask, is this what would happen? Is this...
And will a judge actually...
I believe so.
Because I've had situations come up where...
Adam Boyd now has taken a 2-1 advantage over Jerry Thompson.
And a Hell Rider here for Michael Hetrick. Michael attacking for 1 with Birds of Paradise, thanks to Hell Rider's triggered ability. So Brian flashing back another Faithless Looting, drawing 2 cards. Let's see what he discards here. And I mean, this is somewhat confusing. If you haven't played with both of these decks, it's very hard to understand what is about to happen. And to be honest, I'm not really sure how all these triggers are going to pan out once all is done. So Matthias, so
we checked with our level 2 judge here.
Okay.
And yes, if you present a hypothetical and ask if how it will play out, yes, the judge will answer that for you.
Okay, so the Phantasmal Image, when it comes back, it'll just die as a 0/0, right? It won't.
No, because it's undying. It will come back with a 1/1 counter on it.
Oh, yes.
And if you don't choose another creature, then it doesn't gain the illusion ability.
Correct.
So you just get a 1/1. The board state getting rather
comes in with the 1/1 counter. It's not like it doesn't get it as a trigger when it comes in.
It comes in with the 1/1 counter. I know, fun rules. Fun rules at home.
Fun rule stuff happening.
All right, figure out what's going to happen.
I'm actually quite surprised Brian continued to play more mana guys into this board state.
Right. I mean, and my guess is that he doesn't he's missing how this rules interaction works. And Michael Hetrick will take advantage of this. Michael's aware he's going to metamorph his own Hell Rider and will crash the team. So that is 10 damage before blocks, dropping Brian down to 5.
Yeah, now that's That's a lot of damage.
Yeah, I feel like Brian, not entirely aware, has been a little rules paralyzed here. Which once has to call a judge on that if you're not sure. He's going to have to make quite a few blocks here. Now, granted, he can make these Phantasmal Image undie, which he probably will do. So the play then is he's making the Phantasmal Image undie so he can safely cast his Elesh Norn. The biggest issue with that is the two Hell Riders, as long as they're living here, which they probably will be, will attack for 4 on their own. Even as 1/1s in a post-Elesh Norn world, that puts Brian down to 1. Well, right now he's at 5. And that attack next turn is for 4, so Brian will have to block everything. Basically sweeping his own board.
He actually has to block everything.
Yes.
And there's really nothing he can do about it either. I mean, he's already flashed back his Ancient Grudge, so we can't get them in war from another way.
Correct. Yeah, he's going to have to block everything if he doesn't want to die on the next turn.
And, wow, this game has been incredibly well played by Michael Hetrick.
Yeah, once again he's taken a situation where Brian's plan A of reanimating Elesh Norn came to fruition, and Michael has seemingly continued to play into the board and actually has given himself the option to win. Brian, I think, pretty distraught here. I think he probably feels like this was his game and that it slipped away. You know, it's like you had to reanimate on Elesh Norn. All right, so Shaheen Sarani and Ronnie Sittner are now also going to Game 5. Ronnie Rittner has equalized. So, to recap, we have this match going on here. It looks like Michael Hetrick's going to pull it out. We have Shaheen Sarani and Ronnie Rittner going to Game 5. We have Adam Boyd up 2 games, 1 on Jerry Thompson. We have Lauren Nolan and Max T. It's still on Game 2. Lauren is up 1-0 in this matchup. We will likely be probably bringing you over to that match when this one is done, as that will be the match we'll still have.
Well, we might be able to bring you another match before we go over to that one. Because I imagine that one will go...
If Adam Boyd and Jerry Thompson goes to 5 games, we will probably be able to bring you that one. Alright, so blocks are made. And he's going to have Phantasmal Image undie back as a 3rd Hell Rider. So now these Hell Riders fear no Elesh Norn. Brian's going to need an Arc Trail and a Reanimate spell to stay alive here.
I'm really impressed by Michael Hetrick right now.
Alright, let's see. Does he have it? Is this the Arc Trail we're looking for? That'll do it. That'll keep him alive. I believe it is.
It must be.
Alright, and there we go. 1 and 2 Hell Rider and Phantasmal Image, both gone. And then he's going to reanimate Elesh Norn. Hell Rider's gone. Birds of Paradise is gone. Strangleroot is gone, then comes back and is gone again.
Oh, so wow, look at
Brian.
Brian.
The Arc Trails does get him back into this. Does it?
And he has a Hell Rider of his own. And I think he's got to send the red zone at this point. He's just...
Right. 5 is a lot to do on a board with an active Elesh Norn. So Hell Rider then swings for 7 damage by itself.
Wow, yeah. Michael, I'm down to 9 here.
Alright, can he find a way to pull through on this? He's drawn Hound of Gristlebrand. I don't believe that will be enough. Hound will die, and then undie, and comes a 1/1 first strike for 4. Brian's down to 3. He let 2 of the damage through. So very, very close for Michael Hetrick. And he plays his 1/1 double strike and passes the turn. Looks like, actually, we probably spoke too soon. Michael is going... It's going to be... This matchup looks to be going to 5.
Yeah, it looks to be going to Game 5. And
This is the last call.
Yeah, that
for the two-headed giant.
That arc trail was very strong. And he's got the another Ancient Grudge in the yard now for the Phyrexian Metamorph. And that should take all of Michael Hetrick's outs. So what Michael's hoping here is he's hoping to miracle a bonfire next turn.
Yeah, well, Michael's just dead this turn. Brian can just flash back the Ancient Grudge and attack with everything and he dies.
Okay, that's fair. So, yeah, he's going to do that. Flashback the Grudge. And this swing, I believe... Well, is it lethal?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5... Yes, exactly 9.
That's exact, so he gets in for 6 with the Bird and the Elvish Norn, and then
Yep, that's exact.
3 Colorado triggers.
Michael's going to wait for him to make the play. Assuming we have our life totals correct, Brian's just going to confirm that actually kills him. And they're going to game 5. So the decider one, Hetrick, will be on the play again. Can he get an elusive third game from the Fright Stack? He started out 2-0, has lost his last two games to Legendary Praetor. Will he be able to get one?
Wow.
Part of me thinks he's going to pull it out, actually, even though it's even though this matchup is not in his favor. I feel like he's been fighting really hard in the last 2 games, not getting either of them, but really playing to his outs very well. I feel like if he gets a hand that he can play with, I think Hetrick might be able to pull it out.
Yeah, and I mean, not only, Hetrick put Brian in a position where he had to top deck a specific out in both games. And both of the last 2 games, despite Brian having a turn 3 and a turn 4 Elvish Norn.
Right.
In those games. The turn 3 Elvish Norn was on the play, by the way.
Fair. So, going to 5, Brian Braun, Duin, and Michael Hetrick. Also, Shaheen Sarani and Ronnie Rittner going to 5. Remember, those two are on opposite sides of the bracket. Those matches will only meet in the finals.
So, Max Tietz and Lauren Nolan still on game 1 here.
Game 2.
Game 2, rather.
They're into Moorland dueling Moorland haunts. It's a Delver mirror.
And they both have angels on the battlefield, too. So, with angels on the battlefield, it becomes, they're both 3/4s. So they bounce off of one another. So, if you get tons of this stuff on the battlefield, you can just never attack because both people have 3/4s and
right.
multiple 3/4s.
It will come down to cards like Dismember or Sword of War and Peace.
And you can't, you cannot attack with your angels because an angel and a spirit token kills an angel, and then
right.
so on and so forth. It can get complex. So, what's going on there?
No, we're just just describing. We have a very long, drawn-out Delver match being watched. Believe that it seems like Lauren will get the next game. Lauren has connected a Sword of War and Peace to a Restoration Angel, though it has to face a Gideon. Both players here on our final match will be going to 6. I have to believe that only favors Brian Brunduin.
Yes.
Remember, his deck only needs to assemble 3 pieces or so, and he has a much stronger card advantage engine.
So
Adam Boyd mulliganing his Adam Boyd. So Jerry has won his match. So another one going to game 5. Jerry and Adam Boyd will be going to a deciding game of It's mono blue Delver versus Jerry's classic blue white Delver.
So they're going to game 5 also.
Yep. Adam will be on the play there, so you have to give the edge to Adam, I believe.
And I think Adam has the edge in that matchup.
Yeah. Remember, the winner of that playing the winner of this match. So a bunch of excitement in our first round of the Invitational. All 3 of our matches already going to 5. One of them going still in game 2.
Yeah, so
as a result,
3 matches going to game 5. That's
yep. We'll keep you updated on those other 2 matches. When this one concludes, we'll be moving over to the match between Lauren Nolan and Max Tietz. The other ones are already starting their game 5, so we'll be sticking with this one.
All right, so in for game 5. Michael knows that he's played well, I'm sure. Wants to get rewarded.
Right.
Has to play for this game. Going down to 6 cards.
So when I've talked to him, he's usually fairly level-headed about, some people really can get upset by variance issues. I found that it seems like, doing what you can do is probably the best you can do, so.
And if you play a lot on Magic Online, it's pretty hard to get upset about variance issues.
Yeah.
Although,
certainly there are people who will find a way to do it. So, forced into Birds of Paradise for both players. Hetrick with no turn 2 play, just a root-bound crag. Braun Duin. Now contemplating his turn.
Yeah, so Michael will have a turn 3 Hellrider for us.
It's going to Arc Trail 1 and 2, putting Michael Hetrick to 18. And this was the thing where Michael worried about when I was talking with him. He actually does have the second red in his hand, so Hellrider will be active. Michael also does have a Phantasmal Image. 2 mana creatures for Brian. Hetrick does not have the Arc Trail. He'll play Landwar Elves, and Brian's got to be pretty excited that there's no Arc Trail coming his way. So now he gets untap with 4 and probably 5 mana on turn 3.
So what he's really looking for now is Faithless Looting. Tracker's Instincts or Mulch would also be nice here.
Well, at this point, he can just draw his 6 drops and 7 drops.
Yeah, I mean, by next turn, he'll be able to just cast them.
So Mulch revealing Blackcleave Cliffs and Copperline Gorge, putting a Sun Titan into the graveyard along with an Arc Trail. This game playing out fairly well for Brian right now. He plays the Copperline Gorge. He's going to attack for 1 with Avacyn's Pilgrim. And he'll pass over to Hetrick. So Hetrick's plan to making the turn 3 Hellrider will have to be a turn 4 Hellrider. It's probably 1 Hellrider this turn. Next turn it will be a copied Hellrider and a Strangleroot Geist, which will be significantly more intimidating.
Yeah, that's a lot of damage.
Right. So here's first Hellrider, and a little bit of a damage. Brian let in a little more damage than he needed to by swinging Avacyn's Pilgrim, paying for his greed a little bit. He's going to take 6 there and go to 14. Whereas that, he could have had the trade there if the Pilgrim was at home.
Next turn, he'll be taking 8 before he even declares blockers.
So Brian plays Gavoni Township and passes back. Hetrick's got to be very excited about this.
Yeah.
Brian is not aware of just how much damage is going to be coming his way.
Yeah, a lot of damage right now. Phantasmal Image and Strangleroot Geist going to come down. Phantasmal Image will copy this Hellrider.
And that last card he drew is Strangleroot Geist. Oh, sorry, he does have Hinterland Harbor and Phantasmal Image copying Hellrider. And they'll go ahead and take an attack. So that's 8 damage off the bat. Brian drops to 6.
Yeah.
And he has 2 blockers, but those blockers are going to have to go in,
they both have to go into chum mode.
Yeah, well, they have to go into trade mode, at the very least, which isn't what he was hoping to do with Gavoni Township. Brian had...
Well, they have to go into chum mode, because otherwise he goes to, 1 and has...
And there's Hellriders.
Double Hellriders,
the problem is that Brian needs an Elesh Norn immediately.
Yes.
And an Arc Trail.
Yes.
Which, I don't know if he'll have the mana to do it. I'm not sure he has a line that gets him out of this. The Hellrider plan from Hetrick, he was worried about getting that second red source. He found the second red source for this plan. It looks like it's going to get him there.
And Hetrick had a somewhat disappointing loss in the top 8 of the Grand Prix.
He lost a friend. He lost to Shahar Shinar.
He did lose to Shahar
eventual
Shinar.
winner. All right, so our first match is done. Ronnie Rittner has defeated Shaheen Sarani 3-2. So Shaheen, top-hitting 2 invitationals in a row, will not be the victor of either of them. Ronnie Rittner playing our blue-white blue-white Blade Splicer Delver with no equipment. Did manage to get the game, edge the match in 5. What that does mean is that Michael Hetrick now is the top seed left in the tournament, and will be able, if he manages to continue on winning this one, as it looks like we believe he will be able to be on the play for all the remainder of his matches.
Wow. Suddenly, Michael Hetrick with the no, I would not like to split.
Sure, looking very good.
Very, very confident.
Who did? Okay. All right, and Max Tietz and Lauren Nolan's Game 2 finally has ended. They are now 1-1. We will almost certainly be bringing you over to that match after the conclusion of this one here.
So Max Tietz won.
Max Tietz did pull out the board state there. I don't have the details on it, but yes, he did win that game. Brian chumps with both his team, and there's the concession. Michael Hetrick is through to the top 4. After going up 2-0 in what he considered his worst matchup in the top 8, dropped to 2-2 and managed to 3-2 pull it out. Michael Hetrick, the number 2 seed in the tournament, will now advance. He will await the winner of Adam